Hello, and welcome to Competency 7, in which we'll be focusing on reading comprehension and its applications. First of all, we have to understand that the focus of this competency is a shift from reading as a way of deriving content. Okay, so the student here is focusing on constructing meaning from what he or she is reading. Okay, in the beginning, the student was learning the process of reading. Now they're focusing more on the actual information from the text. Okay. Now, we have to understand that there's a lot of factors that will affect the student's ability to develop reading comprehension. Some of those include their oral language development, the analysis of different vocabulary skills, their prior knowledge as far as like the reading comprehension is concerned, previous experiences, and of course fluency. Here, the teacher must learn to model effective ways to develop content acquisition as part of the classes. Now, when we talk about comprehension, we're really talking about three specific categories. The first of which is literal comprehension, in which the student understands a literal meaning of what is being presented in the text. The second is inferential comprehension, which is the student can, make inferences or come to conclusions based on what he or she is reading. And the third is evaluative comprehension. This is more standard academic reading that is used in this case to assess the student's comprehension level. Okay, so again, talking about the focus shift, here the reader is now reading to learn. Okay, it's no longer learning to read. Okay, and that is like the direct focus of competency 7. So the teacher can imply various strategies to enforce or to develop disabilities in students. Activities include like linking context to the students' lives, or explaining common idioms that are used. And also, it's very important that they have the space for guided independent reading. Okay, so the strategies here need to be varied and they need to be paced to meet the needs of each individual student. Now, the teacher has to present the students opportunities to explore different types of texts. We want to make sure that the student finds his or her niche as far as like which specific texts are of more interest to him or her. Of course, in an academic setting, the student will be required to derive meaning from textbooks in most cases. But that does not mean that the student, will not have the opportunity to develop his or her love for novels, for examples, or for dramatic plays, poetry, things like that. So the teacher here can imply different strategies or a variety of texts in the classroom, have those readily available to the student so that the student can explore them on his or her own. Okay. Now, as far as exploring multiple texts, we also have to be focusing on implementing different types of skills that relate to comprehension. These are more likely linked to summarizing or explaining the facts and opinions of the authors, or to focusing specifically on the main idea and the details that are included in the text. So, along with the varied sources of text, the teacher has to also implement different strategies or different ways of evaluating comprehension. Okay, when we're talking about reading comprehension, we also have to be mentioning metacognitive skills. In this case, these are self-monitoring skills that enhance the comprehension of the student. Okay, you have to make sure that the student takes the time to pause and to make like a self-check as far as like what they're reading and to make sure that they are understanding, right? As far as like the instructional time and the instructional focus of the teacher, he or she has to make sure that the directions are explicit and that they're very direct. Okay, the student has to understand what the focus of the reading activity is, what the expectations are, okay, and in other words, what they're going to be evaluated on. Okay, this has to be very specific from the very beginning. And with the idea of implementing different types of texts, the teacher must try to relate or to connect them with the cultural experiences of the students. You'll find that by doing so, the student will be more engaged in reading than if he or she is presented with texts that are culturally foreign to them. Now, as far as developing correct reading comprehension skills, the teacher has to also establish a correct model of uh, focusing on literary analysis, or specifically with fiction. This goes into texts that include myths, folk tales, fables, legends, drama, poetry, things like that. Now, We've talked a little bit about guided and independent reading. Okay, the teacher here um, must provide examples and must provide time for both. Okay, the student must be guided as far as like what the expectations are, the pacing of reading, the purposes of reading, the different types of points of view of the authors, but he or she must also be given the opportunity to explore text on his or her own time. In other words, you must have a balance between guided reading and independent reading. And of course, as we discussed in other competencies, direct contact with the parents in this case is very important so that the parents are enforcing these type of activities and these type of skills at home.